Welcome to Occult Archives, the show where we dig into the mysteries and myths and, the legends behind some of history's most, well, let's just say caution books.
Question.
Yeah, forget your typical dusty library finds. I mean, we're talking about, like, whispers of forbidden knowledge and secrets that have been, intentionally kept hidden, and the really captivating stories behind why certain texts, sparked both fear and fascination.
Right. And you've joined us for a really intriguing one today. Instead of focusing on a single spine-chilling volumes, we're tracing a far more subtle and kind of enduring current of thought.
Okay.
This is our deep dive into episode 80, Traces of a Hidden Tradition. Isabel Cooper-Oakley and the Secret Legacy of Western Mysticism.
Exactly. And when we talk about these, cautioned books and traditions, it's important to understand that the fear, it wasn't always because the knowledge was evil in itself.
Right.
It was more often a reaction from those in power, religious and political authorities who felt threatened by alternative spiritual perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the one holding the keys to truth, anything that even hints at another way of understanding the universe can be really dangerous to your authority.
Right. It is a threat.
Right.
It undermines that authority, for sure.
Yeah. And that's precisely where Isabel Cooper-Oakley's work, Traces of a Hidden Tradition, becomes so insightful. It's not about, one feared manuscript. It's about identifying a continuous, maybe sometimes underground, but a continuous flow of mystical thought that's, meandered through centuries of Western history. Okay.
Our goal today is to kind of unpack the surprising connections that she uncovers between seemingly, unrelated mystical groups.
Okay, let's unpack this. So Cooper-Oakley, right off the bat, aims to demonstrate a definite design that kind of links all of these various occult brotherhoods and heretical sects and mystic associations of the Middle Ages groups that, at first glance appear to be completely separate.
Right, they seem separate.
Yeah.
But what's really striking about Cooper-Oakley's central argument is her belief that this mystic tradition isn't just like a series of isolated incidents, but something that steadily resurfaces in every century. And she puts forward this really compelling idea of a shared heritage of humanity, a divine human race that possesses these fundamental divine truths.
Okay.
And these truths, she suggests, they aren't just, intellectual ideas or theories. They're something that resonates deeply within the human soul. It's like its highest impulse, this constant yearning for deeper truth.
So it's like this universal spiritual yearning that keeps bubbling up throughout history, finding different ways to express itself.
That's a very clear way to put it. Yeah.
Okay.
And she connects this to what she calls the inner science of the soul, this ongoing mystic quest, this persistent search for hidden truth that lies at the heart of all religions, even if only a few within each tradition actually realize it.
Right. Which, naturally leads to, I guess, the mainstream looking down on these people, right?
Right.
She mentions how mystics were frequently dismissed as mere visionaries, dreamers of vain dreams.
Yeah, exactly. The dominant worldview very often tends to marginalize those who prioritize, the unseen realms, the inner life, over the more tangible, the material world. But Cooper-Oakley challenges that perspective. And she contends that Theosophy, the very spiritual and philosophical system she was involved in, is not some brand new invention, but rather another link in this wondrous chain of mystic teaching that stretches way back in time.
Now, here's where things get interesting. I mean, she wasn't just making this up. She talks about needing to look at these historical dustbins of the Middle Ages to find the proof of this.
Yeah, the historical records.
Right. It's like, wait a minute, let's actually look at the evidence.
Yeah. And that historical record, as she meticulously pieces it together, strongly suggests that Theosophy is a continuation of this glorious wisdom religion that really encompasses all religions and philosophies.
Okay.
And she traces its origins all the way back to the ancient Indian Brahma Vidya, which she identifies as the very same Theosophia that the Neoplatonists talk about.
Okay.
So she's proposing a single ancient source, kind of primordial wellspring from which all these different mystical streams have flowed over time.
It's almost like a spiritual family tree.
Yeah.
With very deep roots. Now, who are some of the key figures whose echoes she finds in all these fragments?
Well, she talks about some really interesting figures, Dionysius the Areopagite and John Scotus Erigena, individuals who are associated with early Christian mysticism and who clearly show a lot of Neoplatonic influence.
Right.
Then she points to the Arabian mystics, including Averroes and the influential centers of learning like the schools of Toledo, and highlights their role in preserving and transmitting Eastern philosophical and mystical thought that would shape those so-called heresies that emerged in the Middle Ages.
And the monasteries weren't just places of quiet contemplation. They also played a part in this transmission, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She emphasizes the role of Eastern and Syrian monasteries in carefully preserving and transmitting the wisdom of thinkers like Plotinus.
Right.
Often filtered through the very influential writings of Dionysius.
Right.
It's as if this body of knowledge was being carefully safeguarded, cultivated in these relatively secluded hubs of intellectual and spiritual life.
And we can't forget the Troubadours, right? Singers of mystic songs and carriers of occult knowledge. That sounds like something out of an adventure.
Yeah, straight out of an adventure, yeah. Cooper-Oakley sees them as more than just wandering entertainers. They were crucial conduits for a deeper understanding. Weaving occult knowledge and symbolism into their seemingly romantic songs and poems.
So she's building this picture of history not as a series of isolated events, but as different expressions of this fundamental mystical tradition adapting to different times and cultures. She even uses this really vivid analogy of a worn mosaic pavement.
Yes, she does, yeah. And from a distance, the mosaic might appear, fragmented and incomplete.
Right.
But when you examine the individual tiles up close, that perfect outline starts to emerge.
Okay.
At the very heart of that outline, she places one central fount, Brahmavidya, from which all these streams diverge.
Right. Now, if this science of the soul was such a persistent undercurrent, it must have caused some friction with the established powers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's talk about the persecution of these mystic traditions.
Okay. This is really a crucial aspect of understanding this hidden tradition. Cooper-Oakley highlights the Roman Church's very often fierce opposition to this science of the soul. They often viewed it as a direct threat to their authority and doctrines.
Right.
And that unfortunately led to attacks and suppression of various groups, including the Albigenses, Paterini, and Vaudois.
Okay.
All of whom she links to earlier Gnostic sects.
Right.
So think of Gnosticism as a set of ancient religious ideas that emphasize personal spiritual knowledge and often drew a distinction between a higher true God and a lesser creator of the material world.
Right.
And Cooper-Oakley sees these ideas resurfacing in many of the groups that she discusses.
So it sounds like the early, maybe more radical ideals of Christianity got kind of reinterpreted as the church gained power.
Well, I mean, her analysis suggests that that those initial, the initial purity and the simplicity of early Christian ideals were gradually over the centuries, transformed by more worldly ambitions. This pursuit of temporal power and institutional control,
right,
that perhaps overshadowed the original inner spiritual focus.
Right. But even within these increasingly powerful structures, there were always individuals and groups seeking something more, right? Something beyond the official, doctrines.
Absolutely. She describes a fluctuating, ever-increasing body of thinkers, mystics, and idealists who existed within both Catholic and later Protestant traditions.
Right.
Who, often felt at odds with the official doctrines and yearned for a higher, a pure, more direct experience of truth.
And this yearning for a deeper understanding led to, I guess, the need for secrecy and the formation of these hidden groups.
Absolutely. The very real fear of persecution and suppression forced those esoteric teachings underground. And Cooper-Oakley discusses the emergence of these secret fraternities that acted as guardians, and transmitters of this ancient knowledge. And they often traced its lineage back to the wisdom traditions of Egypt, Persia, and Greece.
Okay.
And these teachings were often kept hidden from the illiterate multitude who, it was believed, lacked the capacity to grasp them. Who could easily misinterpret them.
It's this suppression, this need for secrecy that probably led to the development of, these hidden traditions and this common language of signs that she talks
Yeah.
about.
Right. I mean, it's
Right.
it's like a shared vocabulary of symbols, gestures, allegorical language
Right.
that allowed these different sects and societies and those labeled as heretics to recognize each other and to communicate sometimes across vast distances and even across time.
So we're looking at a kind of a secret spiritual lineage, Gnostics leading to Manichaeans, then Paulicians, Albigenses, Templars. It's like this hidden spiritual relay race being run across centuries.
That's a very vivid and an accurate way to put it. And she emphasizes that this history of mysticism isn't just an intellectual curiosity; it's also a history marked by martyrdom.
Right.
These groups faced often brutal persecution from from both the Catholic and later Protestant establishments.
One of the criticisms that's sometimes leveled against modern theosophy is that it doesn't have deep roots, that it's a relatively recent invention. How does Cooper-Oakley address that?
Well, she confronts that criticism head on
Okay.
by presenting her research as evidence to the contrary.
Right.
She argues that despite the many different forms that these mystical expressions have taken throughout history, whether it's as formal religious bodies, secret societies, or less structured occult groups,
Right.
there are distinct and consistent points of agreement,
Mm-hmm.
fundamental underlying teachings that reveal this great wisdom religion that's been there all along.
Just like she's saying, look, we're not making this up. We're part of a long tradition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she even quotes a writer named King, who, referencing the early Christian writer Hippolytus, suggests that these heresies were really just old philosophical ideas dressed up in new clothes, so to speak.
Right.
But that even Hippolytus didn't delve far enough back to uncover the ultimate source. And Cooper-Oakley's work is an attempt to take us, further back to that foundational source.
Now, a central tenet of many of these mystical traditions is the idea of reincarnation, the idea that the soul is reborn into different lives. Where does that fit into Cooper-Oakley's argument?
Well, she presents reincarnation as a core belief, a fundamental belief of this ancient wisdom religion, Brahma Vidya.
Okay.
And she traces its presence in various Gnostic-derived mystic societies throughout history.
Okay.
She notes the Catholic Church's rejection of this idea of transmigration, because it conflicted with their doctrine of humanity being uniquely separate from other creatures and subject to this singular scheme of redemption. So Cooper-Oakley argues that the mystics and those labeled as heretics actively resisted this theological isolation of humanity.
Right. So the belief in reincarnation became yet another reason for these groups to face persecution.
Oh, absolutely. She points out that the transmigration of the soul was considered a heretical opinion, for which groups like the Cathari were fiercely persecuted.
Okay.
Interestingly, she also mentions that even the Troubadours, those romantic poets we discussed earlier, often incorporated this idea, this concept, to their mystic poems, despite facing criticism and attacks from Orthodox monks for doing so.
That's right.
It's fascinating how even seemingly unrelated cultural expressions can carry these deeper esoteric ideas.
It's fascinating how the very writings of their opponents can help to reveal these beliefs, these practices.
Absolutely, and Cooper-Oakley emphasizes the importance of looking at the writings of those who opposed these mystical groups,
Right.
In order to uncover those traces of their secret doctrine.
Right.
She specifically mentions the work of Eugene Roux, a devout Catholic scholar whose research on the Troubadours inadvertently provides valuable information about their mystic connection and their esoteric interpretations of mainstream religious concepts.
Right. So through all of this historical research, Cooper-Oakley is building a pretty compelling case for a widespread and interconnected occult fraternity that has been working throughout history to keep these to keep these spiritual truths alive, often operating in the shadows.
Yeah. And their aim was to kind of counteract what they saw as the growing tide of materialism,
Right.
by consistently directing human attention back to, the inner spiritual life as the source of true understanding.
Within this framework, she identifies three principal streams of religious thought: the Petrine doctrine, Pauline doctrine, and Johannine doctrine.
Right.
And she argues that it's this last one, the Johannine doctrine, with its emphasis on mystical experience, that served as the source for many of the later Christian mystical heresies. And she reiterates that true occultism, as she understands it, isn't, about spooky rituals or secret societies for their own sake. It's fundamentally, religious and philosophical in nature, seeking a deeper, understanding of the divine.
Right.
And she gives us some specific historical examples of religious sects that she believes had occult and theosophical underpinnings.
Right. She points to historical religious sects that she argues have clear occult and theosophical foundation, like the Albigenses and the Waldenses,
Right.
Who she sees as the forerunners of later groups like the Wesleyans, Quietists, and Quakers.
Okay.
And then more explicitly esoteric groups like the Rosicrucians and the Knights Templars and the Fratres Lucis, the Brothers of Light.
It sounds like she's offering a revisionist view of standard religious history.
In a way, yes. She points out that how often the conventional, orthodox often deliberately omit any mention of, occultism or esoteric influences when discussing these groups.
Right.
Sometimes actively, erasing those connections in order to maintain a particular narrative.
Right.
And she argues that this necessitates a deeper and a more critical examination of original sources to uncover that often suppressed evidence of esoteric doctrine and the existence of a spiritual hierarchy that often goes unacknowledged in mainstream history.
Right. Now let's jump ahead in history a bit. Cooper-Oakley discusses the rise of, skepticism and materialism during the Enlightenment. How did that shift impact these older mystic traditions?
Well, she views the rise of organized, skepticism, especially as exemplified by the French encyclopedists and groups like the Nicolaites in Germany, as a reaction to what was widely perceived as the church's own, more superstitious beliefs and illogical dogmas, with a revolt of human reason against what was seen as blind faith. However, Cooper-Oakley argues that this intellectual pendulum swung too far in the opposite direction, and led to this rigid and often narrow materialism that dismissed anything beyond the physical realm.
So these skeptical groups in their own way became, another force that tried to suppress mysticism and belief in the unseen.
Absolutely. She describes how groups like the Nicolaites actually attacked prominent mystics of the time, like the Comte de Saint-Germain, Cagliostro, and Saint Martin, as well as the emerging phenomenon of Freemasonry. In a real effort to kind of stamp out what they saw as irrational belief in the unseen world and the occult.
It must have been really difficult for those within these mystic traditions to figure out what was, genuine spiritual insight and what was charlatanism.
Oh, yeah, it must have been, yeah.
Right, with so much skepticism around.
Right. The 18th century witnessed a huge proliferation of various semi-mystical societies, and individuals claiming esoteric knowledge. It made it very difficult to separate the authentic and deeply rooted traditions from those that were more superficial or even deliberately fraudulent. Cooper-Oakley emphasizes that the genuine traditions are typically characterized by a strong emphasis on high morality and spiritual purity qualities that she believes emanate from what she refers to as the Great Lodge, the ultimate source of true esoteric wisdom.
So despite all of these, pressures and periods of skepticism, Cooper-Oakley maintains that there were, connections between these diverse mystic groups across time and across geographical boundaries. How did they manage to communicate, and recognize each other given the risks involved?
She highlights the existence of a common language of signs.
Okay.
She quotes the scholar Rossetti, who astutely observed that seemingly enigmatic historical events, and cryptic writings often become much clearer once you understand this underlying secret language, particularly among groups like the Knights Templar, and those various Gnostic influence groups like the Albigenses and the Cathari.
It's almost like they had their own hidden internet of symbols and gestures that transcended language.
Yeah, a very apt analogy.
Yeah.
Rossetti points to the widespread and often brutal persecution faced by groups like the Templars and the Paterini across Europe, simply for their membership in in secret societies that held doctrines that were deemed to be inimical to the authority of Rome.
Right.
And he even goes so far as to suggest a direct and often deliberately suppressed historical link between the Albigenses and the Templars, who were known to have held and transmitted Eastern religious and philosophical doctrines. It's a connection that's frequently downplayed or even ignored in more mainstream historical accounts.
And these suppressed links, according to Cooper-Oakley, extend to other significant groups as well.
Yes, absolutely. Cooper-Oakley strongly encourages, unprejudiced and thorough study of the historical records to uncover the often overlooked evidence that connects the Knights Templar, the Rosicrucians, and the various branches of Freemasonry. And she even goes on to list numerous 18th century mystical societies and their leading figures as concrete examples of this continuing interconnected esoteric tradition.
Now, the connection to the Knights Templar seems particularly significant, and it comes up quite a bit in her work. How does she view their legacy and its alleged revival or continuation in Freemasonry?
She introduces this intriguing idea that many Masonic usages, rituals, and customs were appropriated, not inherited, in a straightforward manner from these earlier and often suppressed or defunct societies like the Templars. She discusses the perspectives of some Italian Masons who view Freemasonry as a modern vehicle for transmitting ancient spiritual mysteries, even tracing its origins back to figures like Mainz, the founder of Manichaeism. They saw him as attempting to kind of revive the ancient mysteries of Zoroaster while integrating the ethical teachings of Jesus Christ.
Now, Manichaeism itself was also, a persecuted religious movement.
It was, yeah. Cooper-Oakley mentions the severe and sustained persecution that the Manichaeans faced at the hands of both religious and political authorities. And she even highlights the sort of ironic role of St. Augustine, a prominent early Christian theologian who had been a follower of Manichaeism before becoming one of its most vocal persecutors. But despite that, intense opposition, Maine's teachings did manage to spread, quite widely, through his dedicated disciples, and they reached, as far as Egypt, where they mingled with existing Coptic, Christian, and Jewish mystical traditions.
So how do the medieval crusades factor into this transmission of esoteric knowledge, from east to west?
Cooper-Oakley suggests, drawing on the work of Regolini de Schio, that the crusades, despite their overtly religious aims, inadvertently provided a way for certain mysteries of the children of the widow, which is a term often associated with Manichaean traditions and the cult of the great architect, which are ideas that are linked to the Hiram Abiff allegory and Freemasonry, to gain a foothold in the Western world. European crusaders, through their extended stays in the East, had opportunities to be initiated into these diverse mystical traditions, and subsequently transmitted elements of them back to Europe upon their return.
Okay.
It's kind of a twist of historical irony that these religious wars inadvertently facilitated, the spread of alternative spiritual ideas.
And Cooper-Oakley also notes that the doctrine of God's unity, which is a key element of many Eastern traditions, was also preserved through these mysterious channels.
Yes, she emphasizes that the belief in the fundamental unity of the divine,
Yeah.
Which is central to many Eastern philosophies and mystical paths,
Right.
was diligently preserved through these mystery traditions in regions like Palestine, Syria, and Egypt,
Right.
particularly by Coptic priests who carried on the teachings of Hesman,
Okay.
who was an important early disciple of Mainz.
No, Cooper-Oakley touches upon this intriguing phenomenon of semi-Masonic bodies that operated under what are called unknown heads.
Right.
What can you tell us about the significance of this the secrecy?
Yeah, this recurring phenomenon of various esoteric groups, often with clear Masonic or quasi-Masonic structures, being led by undisclosed leadership and drawing upon hidden sources of inspiration. These unknown heads, particularly in German-speaking esoteric circles, was actually quite common.
Okay.
And Cooper-Oakley traces the origins of this deliberate secrecy back to ancient priesthood,
Right.
and particularly the Egyptian priests,
Right.
who employed rigorous systems of probation, detailed examination, and formal initiation to make sure that these sacred mysteries were entrusted only to those deemed worthy and prepared to receive them.
So it was basically a system designed to protect this knowledge and prevent it from being misused.
Right. It was a way to ensure the preservation